Dear students, after discussing in detail about the insulin and their therapeutic uses, adverse effect, now initially in the first lecture we have discussed about if the blood sugar is not properly controlled, then on long term it may lead to various microvascular and macrovascular complications. Okay, but these are the long term complications. Now on a short run, or we can say that acutely, there can be certain other complications also, and one of the most common is diabetic ketoacidosis. And in today's class we will discuss about the pharmacotherapy of diabetic ketoacidosis. Now the learning objectives of the today's session are: students should know the pathophysiology of diabetic ketoacidosis. Then what are the causes of diabetic ketoacidosis? What are the treatment objectives of diabetic ketoacidosis and agents along with their dosage regime in a proper sequence, because this is an emergency condition and timely administration of a particular drug in a particular sequence is very important for the successful outcome of any emergency condition. Similar thing is applied to diabetic ketoacidosis. So these all we will discuss, but first, what is diabetic ketoacidosis? Okay. In a diabetic patient, when the blood sugar level is more than 250 mg per deciliter and arterial pH is less than 7.3, it means that when the blood sugar is high and when the pH is less, the patient is stated to be having diabetic ketoacidosis. Now, what are the causes? Now, before going further, I would like to tell that this diabetic ketoacidosis is more commonly seen in type 1 diabetic patient as compared to the type 2, and the most common cause is infection. If a diabetic patient develops infection, then there are chances of development of diabetic ketoacidosis. And if the patient is having an intercurrent infection and reduced food intake, and patient is having that misbelief that as I have reduced the food intake, now my requirement of insulin is also less, and hence he has decreased the insulin administration by himself or herself, and that will lead to diabetic ketoacidosis. This is the most common cause of diabetic ketoacidosis. And the other causes are pancreatitis, stroke, trauma, and any type of stress. Okay. Now, clinical features. In the diabetic ketoacidosis, there is an significant rise in the blood sugar level, and these rise in the blood sugar level, it will lead to increased glucose loss into the urine. These will lead to the osmotic diuresis, and because of this there is a loss of electrolytes like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and one of the important electrolyte is potassium also. Okay. Another problem is, so one is the hyperglycemia and the second is ketosis. Because the insulin is lack, you know that insulin is an anabolic hormone, so there is a breakdown of the protein, breakdown of the fat, and because of the breakdown of the protein and the fat, the more ketone bodies are produced, and as they are not metabolized, there will be a ketosis, ketone bodies seen in the plasma as well as they are excreted in the urine. And because of this ketosis, one thing is that the blood pH is reduced, acidosis is there. Second, because of this ketone bodies, there will be vomiting. Now these vomiting further exacerbate dehydration. Now we will look into this picture. One is the diuresis, that will lead to dehydration. Then vomiting, that will lead to dehydration. And because of the acidosis, what will happen, that there is a loss of fixed ions, okay, loss of acidic ions into the urine, and that will again hasten the dehydration. Because of the acidosis, body will try to eliminate more carbon dioxide, that will lead to hyperventilation, that will lead to dehydration. Okay, so dehydration is the hallmark symptom of diabetic ketoacidosis. Okay, and last but not the least is there is an impairment of glucose entry into the brain, which will lead to impaired consciousness. So the symptoms are, as there is an excessive urination, as I have told you, and because of this there is a thirst, there is an catabolism, because of this there is a weight loss, there is a weakness, because of the increased ketone bodies there is a vomiting, potassium loss lead to leg cramps, blurring of vision. Yes, many a times the abdominal pain is the only symptom. And the signs, similarly, all the signs of the dehydration, signs, hypotension is there. Obviously, hypotension is associated with tachycardia. Patient is having an increased rate of respiration, and especially the smell of acetone, Kussmaul breathing is there. And at last, confusion, drowsiness and coma. Once the patient enter into this phase, then the chances of survival is less. So, based on this discussion, we can say that there are three main clinical picture, or we can say that clinical presentation in the diabetic ketoacidosis. One is the dehydration, second is the hyperventilation, and third is the impaired consciousness. Okay. Now the treatment objectives. First and foremost, as I have told you, there is a significant fluid and electrolyte loss. So, the correct fluid and electrolyte disturbances. There is an approximately 6 liters of fluid losses in a patient with diabetic ketoacidosis. Then, the whole metabolic abnormality is seen because of the rise in the blood sugar, and the rise in the blood sugar is because of the lack of the insulin. So, it can only be corrected with the help of the insulin. So, correction of the blood sugar level with the insulin, and as I have told you, the most common underlying cause is infection. So, treat the underlying cause, that is infection, and educate the patient regarding the prevention of the future episode. Okay. So, now to manage or to correct the dehydration, electrolyte imbalance and the metabolic abnormalities, especially the rise in the blood sugar, administration of insulin and intravenous fluids as early as possible. One should not wait for the investigation, then come to the diagnosis and then start the treatment. No, as I told you, it is an emergency condition, and that's why you start with this insulin and IV fluids, and then you send the sample for the investigation, and then the further line of the treatment according to the clinical and biochemical review. And these are the different lab investigations: electrolytes, blood glucose, plasma bicarbonate because of the acidosis, arterial blood gas analysis again for the acidosis, urine analysis for the ketone bodies, and to identify whether there is an underlying infection or not, complete blood count, blood and urine culture, and C-reactive protein. But again I am repeating the same statement that treatment should not be withheld just because of the lab investigations. Treatment is started as early as possible. So, how will you correct the blood sugar level? Administration of short-acting, soluble or regular insulin intravenously. Then fluid replacement for the dehydration, normal saline, half normal saline, 5% dextrose, that we will see in the next subsequent slides. Then yes, you know that potassium is a very important ion, and its deficiency will lead to the arrhythmias and other ECG changes, and that's why potassium replacement, if at all Generally, when the acidosis subsides or when the ketosis subsides, the blood pH comes to the normal. But if not, then one can go for administration of bicarbonate and phosphate. And yes, there is an infection found, then administration of a suitable antimicrobial agents. Now we will discuss about the role and the dosage regime of each of these agents one by one. First of all, fluid replacement. Initially, as I told you, there is a total 6 liter of fluid loss in a patient of diabetic ketoacidosis, and the aim of the therapy is to replenish this fluid loss within 24 hours. Initially, the 1 liter of normal saline, that is 0.9% NaCl, it is to be administered within 1 hour. It is followed by 0.5 liter per 4 hour of the half normal saline, because we don't want to increase the sodium level, at the same time we want to correct the dehydration also. And once the heart rate, the blood pressure comes to the normal, then one can reduces reduces from normal saline to half normal saline. And once the blood sugar reaches to 300 milligram per deciliter, you have to add 5% of dextrose in half normal saline. Now you must have the question that why we have to administer the glucose in case of the diabetic ketoacidosis, because the reason is very clear that blood glucose falls before the ketones are fully cleared from the circulation. So blood glucose starts declining, but ketone body is not removed from the body. So you have to give the insulin to correct this ketosis. And if you correct this, then there are chances of fall in the blood sugar level, and that's why you have to add dextrose. Okay. Then the insulin. As I told you, regular insulin intravenously is added, and initially 0.1 to 0.2 unit per kg IV bolus is to be administered, followed by 0.1 unit per kg per hour. It is to be administered, and when the blood sugar reaches to 300 milligram per deciliter, because of this administration, generally it reaches within 4 to 6 hours, the 300 milligram per deciliter, then the requirement of the insulin is 2 to 3 units per hour. Now, what should be the rate of the decline of the blood sugar, and what exactly we want? Now, if we are adding the insulin at a rate of 0.1 unit per kg per hour, if there is a reduction in the blood glucose level 10% per hour, okay, if there is a reduction, say for example, if the blood sugar is 500 milligram, then within 1 hour if it reduces the 450 milligram, then it is called an appropriate response. And if it is not there, you can double the dose of the insulin. Fine. And this insulin 2 to 3 units per hour, it is to be continued till the patient is conscious and the routine subcutaneous insulin administration has been started. Then potassium. Okay, now it is a very tricky thing that in a case of the diabetic ketoacidosis, when initially you measure the plasma potassium level, it is normal, or maybe sometimes it is somewhat high, but actually there is a significant potassium loss into the urine. Now how this is possible? The reason is very simple, dear friends. As there is an acidosis, so the potassium enters potassium exchanges with the hydrogen ion, and when you start administering insulin, then what will happen? That potassium is driven back intracellularly. Previously, what will happen? The potassium that is there inside the cell, it comes out of the cell and enters into the plasma, and that's why extracellular potassium level or the plasma potassium level is normal, but there is a significant deficit of the intracellular potassium. Now why this occur? Because there is an entry of the hydrogen ion into the cell, and in the exchange of the hydrogen ion, the potassium ions enters into the plasma. Okay, and why there is an entry of hydrogen ion into the cell? Because of it is an natural response to the acidosis. Now once the acidosis subsides, so there is a now no more entry into the hydrogen ion into the cell, so again the potassium enters into the cell, and that's why it will lead to significant hypokalemia. Okay, and that's why initially potassium replacement is not required, but after 3 to 4 hours, as I have told you, all the potassium, it enters into the cell because there is a significant intracellular potassium deficiency, and then you have to administer potassium at a rate of 10 to 20 milliequivalent per hour, potassium chloride to the IV fluids. Okay, and rate of the potassium chloride infusion, it is very important that you will guide the serum potassium level. It is guided by the serum potassium level and ECG. So dear friends, I have forgotten to tell you one thing, that in the initial 24 to 48 hours, the repeated biochemical measurement and the administration of the agents according to this is very vital. Then bicarbonate. Usually the acidosis, it is not required bicarbonate. Why? Because even if the acidosis is there, acidosis is because of ketosis. Once the ketosis subsides, the acidosis corrects by itself. But still, if the patient is having exhaustive ventilation and the arterial blood pH is less than 7, then give 50 milliequivalent of sodium bicarbonate. Okay, but never ever try to overcorrect the acidosis, because this insulin therapy will itself correct the acidosis, and if you are still adding the bicarbonate, then there are chances of entry of the patient into the alkalosis. If there is a requirement of the phosphate, you can also administer phosphate. And lastly, antimicrobials, because if you find that there is an infection based on the biochemical parameters, CBC, C-reactive protein, blood culture, tissue culture, then to administer the antimicrobials that are effective and cover the wide range of organisms. Additional treatment, if the patient has not passed the urine, then you start the catheterization. Then many a times the patient is semi-conscious or unconscious, and as I have told you, one of the symptoms of the ketonemia and ketosis is vomiting. So administration of the nasogastric tube to keep the stomach empty. Then central venous line, because again I am repeating the same point, the key problem in the diabetic ketoacidosis is dehydration. So many a times you require vigorous fluid replacement, and for that's why there may be requirement of central venous line. And if the blood pressure is significantly low, even after the fluid administration, then you have to give plasma expander. Okay. Now, so this is all about the diabetic ketoacidosis treatment. Okay. So in summary, diabetic ketoacidosis usually seen in type 1 diabetes. Most common cause is infection. The symptoms are dehydration, hyperglycemia, and the symptoms because of the impaired glucose entry into the brain. Fluid replacement or the correction of the fluid loss within 24 hours is the aim, that is 6 liter. Initially normal saline, followed by half normal saline, followed by 5% dextrose. Then correction of the hyperglycemia with the help of the administration of regular insulin. Then after 2 to 3 hours, there is a significant hypokalemia, so administer potassium chloride. If acidosis, give bicarbonate and treatment of the infection with the antimicrobial. Now there is another condition that is called the hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. So it means that the ketosis is not there, it means the acidosis is not there, but the osmolarity is very high, and it is commonly seen in elderly type 2 diabetic patients, and the causes are same as that of diabetic ketoacidosis. So I will not go into the detail, okay, but the blood sugar is very high, and because of this there is an uncontrolled glycosuria, and which result into the significant dehydration, and it will ultimately lead to hemoconcentration up to a level that the renal blood flow significantly compromised, and finally the urine output reduces, and because of this the glucose is not lost into the urine, and the plasma glucose rises significantly up to more than 800 milligram of deciliter. And because of the glucose in the plasma increases, plasma osmolarity also increases to more than 350 milliosmoles per liter. And remember friends, that mortality in this hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma is very high as compared to diabetic ketoacidosis, and the treatment principles remain same. The only difference is that fluid replacement is more vigorous and more faster, even more than the case of the diabetic ketoacidosis. And as I told you, there is an hemoconcentration, and there is a chances of thromboembolism is more, so prophylactic heparin administration is must. So this is all about the treatment of hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. Okay, the only difference is faster fluid replacement. No need to treat ketoacidosis because there is no ketosis actually as such, and these patients are more prone to thrombosis, so give heparin. So this is all about the treatment of hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. If you are having any question, you can ask.